WDW Radio, your information station.
So today is a very special day, and as we celebrate Walt Disney World's 40th anniversary, it is a true privilege and an honor to be with someone who was a very important part of that history. We are standing outside the Imagination Pavilion here in Epcot's Future World, and the person sitting next to me is none other than Santa Claus. No, he is in fact the original Dreamfinder. We know him today as Ron Schneider. Ron, my friend.
Lou.
So good to see you.
It's contagious! My God.
And these are two of your biggest fans. These are my kids, Nicholas and Marion.
They're not that big.
To me, they are.
Yeah, like so.
So I am so grateful you to come out and spend a little bit of time with our group here, because when we were talking about Walt Disney World's 40th, it's about Magic Kingdom, but it's about here too. And the Dreamfinder is truly one of the lost treasures. You know more than anybody that the Dreamfinder and sort of that original Figment has almost like a cult-like following, and many of us here, including my 6- and 7-year-olds, miss the Dreamfinder very much.
Well, they're not alone. I hear it from all sides. I was out here. It's funny because I was out here for the 25th anniversary and walking around, and people who I didn't know, and I wasn't dressed any different, but people were coming up. Women were hugging me and kissing me. And the thing was that they were introducing me to their children who had no idea who I was and why their parents were forcing them to take their picture with me. I'm glad your children had a proper education.
Well, and I think part of the reason for that too is because Dreamfinder wasn't just a character inside the attraction. He was a living, breathing, walk-around person, because he used to actually have meet and greets up here, and he used to sort of roam the park too and greet guests. So we, as early fans, have a lot of memories and photographs of actually meeting the person from the attraction, which is not something you really get to do often in Disney World.
Mm-hmm. Also the story that was created behind him, that Tony Baxter and the Imagineers created behind him, I think is a lot of why he's stuck with us. The backstory that was presented on the ride was particularly potent. There was a strong identification drawn between Dreamfinder, Figment, and the audience. It was about our collective imagination. And that warm feeling really carried us. And there was also the fact that at the time Epcot opened, Dreamfinder was the only character in the park. There was no Mickey and no Minnie until several years later when Mr. Eisner came in. So there was not much else here that was specifically for children. And all the pre-publicity before the park opened, the characters were featured and people latched onto those. I know that as a child growing up, you're always looking for the characters in the ads. So before we even opened the park, I was on the Orange Bowl parade going through Miami. And coming down the main drag there, everybody along the route knew who I was, knew who we were, and were screaming, "Hi, Dreamfinder!" Which really puzzled me because I had no idea where they would have heard about us, but I figured it must have been from that publicity.
Well, I remember the Today Show, too, with Brian Gumbel. Like, the Dreamfinder figured very prominently in the opening of Epcot. Again, like you said, Epcot was very much not about Mickey and Minnie and the Fab Five, but you were sort of the face. You and Figment were the face, and you had a very sort of symbiotic relationship with that character, sort of brought him to life. And we caught that from that very first interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So tell us, a lot of people who were watching live in the box were asking, how do you get the role? How do you sort of get the role and sort of audition for a role of a completely new character like Dreamfinder?
I was working at Epcot. I was working at Disneyland in the Golden Horseshoe Review, understudying the great Wally Bogue. And one of the great things about working in the company is that there's always access to the company. You get seminars, you get tours. And Tony Baxter, who created the pavilion, was doing a presentation at the University of Disneyland on careers at WED. And so we had a bunch of employees there, and he was talking about some of his work, and he mentioned that he was working on The Journey into Imagination, and he held up a picture of Dreamfinder and Figment, one of the sketches. And I took one look at the drawing and said, I want to do that. That's what I want to do next. And I contacted a friend of mine who worked at Imagineering, who was in the sound department there. I asked him for a recording of the character's voice, and which he was glad to supply me with. And when I went to pick it up, he introduced me to Tony Baxter. Tony and Barry Braverman sat me down, gave me a long presentation about the characters, showed me the first scene of the ride, all set up, just been programmed, and gave me the background, gave me the backstory for the character. Then I went to my boss at Disneyland, Sonny Anderson, who was in charge of casting for all the parks, and said, I want to create this character. I want to be the first character guy to do this. And he called the head of entertainment here, who was another old friend of mine. I didn't know this at the time, but Pete Blaustein, God bless him, the two of them said, all right, you got the job that afternoon. And went home, started working on it, and doing a little preparation work. Nothing could prepare me for what I'd find, but I did research on dragons and nature and a creative process and all this stuff. And finally, when the park opened, we were thrown out here. The ride wasn't opened yet, so we kind of had to make our own way, had to find a way to engage the guests. We didn't just want to be a photo opportunity. We wanted to play with people. We wanted to draw them into the theme of creativity and engage their minds. And we found a way to do that.
I know a lot of people probably are curious as to whether there was sort of obviously the walk around character outside and the character in the attraction as well. Mm-hmm. Did you have any role in the actual attraction, or was it just sort of the walk around character?
I got to do the voice for the character in the ride. At the time that I was found, and I had told you I had a tape of the character voice, and immediately took that tape over to a friend of mine who worked at Chiat Day Advertising, and he helped me recreate the voice, because when I was strolling outside, I wanted to be able to match what was inside the ride. And so I worked with him for a while and went home and left a message on my phone machine saying, Ron's off on a flight of fancy and won't be back for some time. So leave a message after you hear the tone. And I came home from work the next day, and 10 people had called and hung up on my phone machine without leaving messages. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be hysterical if that was Tony Baxter, and that's who it was. The last person left a message was my friend Ken Lisi, who got me the tape. He calls me immediately, and he says, call me the second you get this message. So I call him, and it turns out that Chuck McCann, who had done the majority of the ride, there was a couple of tracks yet left that had to be done. And so I went in. The next day, I was at Imagineering meeting Exitencio, who wrote Pirates of the Caribbean and The Haunted Mansion, and a swell guy. And I was in auditioning for him. They put me right into a sound booth, and we laid down some of the tracks for the ride. The old Realm of Science, there were like 5 couplets that you would hear in there. And I was skyrocket soar towards outer space. Imagine yourself in an infinite place. I was the Dreamfinder up on the camera crane at the end of the ride. Figment and I have enjoyed our journey into imagination with you.
All right, so Ron, thank you very much. And again, tell people about your website and your upcoming book.
The website is called From Dreamer to Dreamfinder. It's Dreamfinder with 2 E's, DREEMFINDER.wordpress.com. And it's me basically spilling my guts about 40 years behind a name tag. And it's going to be up I'm going to be completing it over the course of the next couple of months. And then we're going to take a lot of it down and embellish what's there. Right there is the basic outline for a book. It's going to be a book about my 40 years, and also mixed in there is going to be a textbook about creating and performing in theme parks. So there's going to be a lot of that kind of stuff. I'm working with Jim Hill and some very talented people from around the web on it. There's been a lot of demand, so I'm delighted to finally get to work on it.
Awesome. And we'll definitely let people know when it comes out.
Indeed.